Hi, I'm Marius from Planetdamage, and you're watching Talk About Krach. Planetdamage, that's an electro-industrial musical project 5 years in the making and still being fine-tuned as we speak.
Sitting on the rooftop with a gun. 2 clicks, so 99 kills done.
First of all, how are you doing?
Ballistic and full of nuclear-grade coffee that helps me counter the adverse effects of COVID apathy. Man, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
How would you call the music you make?
That's a good question. I'm heavily influenced by a different genre every single month. But the core of the music that I make is rooted well in electro-industrial, so sacrilege or not, that's what I go for. Although you will find very distinct elements of breakbeat and psytrance in a few releases. Cyberpunk would be a great term to use, but that's such a broad umbrella term that it doesn't really narrow down the musical scope.
Answer with yes or no. A walk in the forest.
Yes, Tamriel would be best, but at this point, any forest would do.
Hardware synthesizers.
I'm more of a software guy, but I do appreciate a tangible electronic musical piece of gear. So let's go with both. You can't go with both, so let's go with yes.
Techno music.
Nah, this really is a definition sort of thing. Are we talking about the broad umbrella term, or is this a more refined subgenre thing? I would go for a yes, though. I grew up with the techno pop of Kraftwerk, and then I've listened to a lot of left field underground stuff. I love the Detroit stuff, I love the abstract bits, so TLDR, yes.
Live shows.
Visiting them or performing at them? Both, yes.
Books.
Big fat yes. I have little time to read, and that breaks my heart, and I have a growing list of stuff that I need to read. The latest one that I read was the book by Pat Cadigan, which was based on William Gibson's Alien 3 screenplay. There's lots of great ideas in there. I don't want to spoil it for you, but technically speaking, you don't have to shed tears for a lot of characters that you'll learn to love in Aliens the movie.
Could you name a few influences for your music and life?
Aliens the movie. No, seriously, having mentioned William Gibson, his work has had a tremendous impact on my life. Neil Stephenson and Mark Faby as well. Let me just recommend the book Snow Crash and Worm, respectively. In terms of music, there's a whole lot more to mention. Mantello and the Fixers, Skinny Puppy, Frontline Assembly, Early Leather Strip, Front 242, Clock DVA, Hat Scan, Juno Reactor. They are just the strongest contenders in a very long list of musicians who had a strong influence on me.
Your latest album Relapse Protocol came out last year. When can we expect new music?
There's a bunch of new ideas floating around in varying degrees of completeness on my hard drive, so this really depends on when I get hit by a deadline notice. A new album should be seeing daylight or blacklight or whatever the industrial version of light is in 2022. This year, which is 2021, I had a remix EP released in May, and my side project Sanity Checks, which I do with Brian from the Gothsicles, we released our debut EP as well. So at this point, I'm really wishing for the limitless pill that would sort of multiply my almost non-existing time.
How's your songwriting process?
This is going to be a long one. I'm a planner, so I do have a few things prepared. First one's coffee. Second one is my Bitwig template. And the third thing is a Google spreadsheet. And this is the spreadsheet that I use to keep track of where I am. With every single track, with phases like arrangement, lyrics writing, vocal recordings, mastering, and so on. I have 18 separate phases for every single track. And once every single phase is at 100%, the track is finished, or more like I stop meddling with it. One thing that I do have to mention is that originally this idea came from Zug of Angel's Pit, so I'm really thankful to him for this great idea. Helps a lot. So coffee, Bitwig template, and the spreadsheet, that's just the prep phase. What I usually do is that I do these 60 minute long sessions during which I have to come up with a combination of a good verse and a good chorus. If I can listen to these on a loop for a long time, that constitutes as good. Usually I start with the chorus. If I can loop that for a long time, that's a good start. Then I dumb down the bass and the chords, and then I call that a verse. And if I have time, a few minutes remaining from those 60 minutes, I'll try to do a middle eight as well. And yeah, I do work with a pop song structure. So I do have these 60-minute long sessions, and after I have 10 or 15 of these, maybe more, I sit down and I select the best ones. Then I pick those, write the working titles or the title ideas into the spreadsheet, and that's gonna be the core of the new release. Kick and bass and the pads are the first, the vocals are the last, usually. I can't put a length on a track. Sometimes that's a week, sometimes that's 3 months. But the good thing about the whole songwriting process is when you sit down and you know that you have to have chorus and the verse combo ready, it's sort of, it gives you a routine. It gives you the muscle memory, so to say. You can fight through the mental blocks better, and it really helps you with the keyboard shortcuts. Because you can do everything a lot faster if you know the shortcuts.
Choose one of the two options, cyberpunk or cybergoth.
Is this really a question? Cyberpunk all the way, baby. I've spent a lot of time researching and implementing cyberpunk into my life, so 150%. Cybergoth, if we're talking about the Hoover hair peeps dancing under the bridges, that's not my thing. Funny though, the first time I heard the phrase cybergoth, it was in a review for a 40k novel entitled Inquisitor.
Industrial or EBM?
That's the toughest question, seriously. They're so organically woven together in my head, can't really separate them. Maybe industrial has a bit more variety, diversity in it, so probably industrial more than EBM, but I bet this is gonna net me a few pop fights.
Live show or studio session?
Studio session all the way. I have more control over things in a studio than in a live environment, but then again, without a live environment, your music cannot really properly get to live. Sadness ensues now.
DAW or synthesizer?
DAW all the way. I'm a software guy and I like to keep things as mobile as possible.
CD or streaming?
In terms of being mobile, streaming or listening to MP3s is more efficient, full stop. But I've just gone through dusting off my CD collection because I do have that. and that collection of print, artwork, autographs, notes, even how a CD case is broken. That's a lot of history. That carries a lot of memories, and an MP3 doesn't do that. And I do believe that a lot of times nowadays you don't buy a CD to listen to it, you buy it to support the artists. So CD it is.
What's your favorite movie?
That's the second toughest question. I'm very much a sci-fi movie guy, and there's just so much great stuff to pick from that I cannot narrow it down to one. I can narrow it down to four, which is Aliens the movie, Blade Runner, the 1995 anime version of Ghost in the Shell, and Hackers. If I have to pick six, then I would add Johnny Mnemonic and Cypher.
How would you spend the last day on Earth?
In as much rock as possible.
Your latest release was meant to be a mixtape. Why did you decide to change that?
Okay, I think we're talking about my first album, Relapse Protocol here. This is actually a mixtape. It's a non-stop 40 minutes of audio material full of then new songs or complete reworks of my older tracks. And it's also the set list of my gig at the Fekete Music Festival 2020 in Hungary. When preparing for the gig, I thought it's better not to stop during gigs, and instead of working on what funny one-liners to say between songs, I would just work on music transitions instead. And I do believe that the mixtape format is a strong one, and in tandem with playing a live gig, that's a good combo. But looking back at the reactions from listeners and album purchasers and DJs, I do think that listeners and DJs need songs with a definite beginning and a definite end. Or I need to release a proper album and a mixtape version of it as well. Or something.
What's your favorite dark electro act?
Two releases that I listened to a lot during uni was Brainstorming and Blood in Face, both by Yellwork. And I've heard a lot of sinister shit, but whenever Yellwork tracks come up, you go like, uh-oh, whatever story this is the soundtrack for, that's not gonna end well. That's definitely Peter Van de Veen territory right there. Yellwork all the way. Listen to all the Yellwork stuff.
With which artist would you like to have a coffee with, and why?
Okay, let me recap everything. This is the hardest question. There's so many artists whose music I adore that this is a really hard pick. Man, all of them. If I have to narrow this down, I would say everybody that I worked with during these past 5 years but I couldn't meet personally, probably I would meet them first. And everybody else after that.
Where do you see Planetdamage in 10 years?
Well, this totally depends on where Planetdamage is in 9 years' time. This is the kind of thing that you usually say at job interviews. That really works well at job interviews. Probably not here, but it sounded a whole lot better in my head when I started saying it. But seriously, I would like to think that I'm still in business. Lots of collaborations, lots of soundtrack work, a lot of live coding that I would like to get into, and a lot of visuals that I would do in Touch Designer or something similar.
What is your opinion about the trend to produce singles more likely than albums?
Comes with the time, I guess. I understand life is fast now, and to maintain continuous engagement, you have to trickle down new stuff to your followers and listeners continuously. But I do prefer the unity that albums have. There's consistency, there's coherence. There's a narrative arc, there's an emotional arc as well. The track order is important, so that's a story in itself. That's a unit, and I would go with the album. more than a combination or a selection of singles. That's just my preference here.
Last words.
Firstly, thanks for having me on the show. It was great to share bits and pieces from the Planetdamage universe. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who watched this. I'd like to say thank you to all the Planetdamage fans and all the amazing people who helped me get this far. You know who you are. Thanks for listening to this. Keep sane, be cool to each other, and stay frosty.
That's not just my assessment. All that has to change.